residence, a foster home in East Austin. Then he sees that familiar face, and a smile washes across his face, and his eyes light up as he walks into the outstretched arms of his CASA friend. This little boy does not understand that his friend, a court-appointed special advocate, is there because a family judge has requested her to be there. The little child simply knows that in the tumultuous life he lives, there is someone who is a constant presence. Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. To be a presence in the lives of those children facing extremely difficult circumstances is what CASA is about. That's our topic for today. To live out one's faith in a tangible way is what CASA is all about. I'd like to have each of you watching this program meet three very special people in our Austin community. Kathy Cockrum, a case coordinator and a member of the second training class of CASA. David Allen, a CASA volunteer. And Karen Boatwright, the member of the first training class of CASA. Karen, you've been around the longest, and so let's start with you. Tell us about CASA. Where did it originate? Give us a little history of it, would you please?
CASA is a national organization. It began in Seattle, Washington about 12 years ago. There are now CASA programs in 49 of the 50 states. We have about 15,000 volunteers nationwide. In Texas, there are currently 22 programs with several more being formed currently. In Austin, in Travis County, we've been in existence for 5 years and have trained 6 classes of volunteers.
So you started in 1984, 85, in that time frame. Mm-hmm. Were you one of the first CASAs in the state of Texas, or were there others that you modeled yourselves after?
There were several other programs already in the state, and we were anxious to join in and be a part of the program.
Karen, how did you hear about CASA? Where did that come from?
I was part of a community presentation. The Junior League gave a presentation about CASA. One of the local judges talked to our class, and I knew instantly that CASA was what I wanted to do as my volunteer placement the next year.
David, what about you? You are a father and active in the community in the business capacity. How did you happen to know about CASA, and what intrigued you and brought you into CASA?
There was a public service announcement on a local network that I didn't see the whole story, but I saw the tail end of it where it spoke of advocating for children and their rights and put a number on the screen. That was in the spring of 1987. A class did not start until the fall, and I continued to contact CASA asking about how soon we could get involved with it and start advocating and finding out more about the children. And when the training occurred, it was good timing for me because with my schedule I'm able to plan my own time, so I'm able to work in some interviews with children and advocating for their rights.
A person who might be interested in working with CASA should be a person then who has interest in children and assisting them in the midst of some difficult times in their lives. But you have to also go through some training, I understand. And Kathy, what about the training that CASA volunteers are involved in?
They go through quite an extensive training. We have been offering training only once a year in September, and they complete around 20 to 25 hours of training. We are going to start offering training twice a year, and our next training class will be in February. We just trained 55 new volunteers that we're very, very excited about, and they should all start receiving new cases very soon.
I mentioned to you before we went on the air that the people who are watching this program may never have heard of CASA. Tell us a little bit about the number of volunteers that you have. You just trained 55. How many are enrolled then in CASA in this Austin chapter?
We probably have 80 to 90 what we call old volunteers like Karen or David that trained several years ago and have stayed with our organization and offer us a lot of support and have taken several cases during their time as a CASA volunteer.
Karen, you were in that first training class. Mm-hmm. You are one of the old volunteers.
I don't know if I like that term or not.
Tell us, why do you stay with CASA? Why do you stay and give your time, your energy, your effort to this community service organization?
Well, when you become involved in an organization like CASA, you see what a great need there is. And many of us that have been volunteers for several years have gone on to be a part of the CASA board, work with fundraising, work in various aspects in addition to having CASA cases. But there are so many children out there. I think in the newspaper last week they said there would be 3,000 referrals made this year in Travis County. We've got a long way to go before we'll ever have a CASA for all 3,000 referrals.
Tell me, how many people, how many children does a CASA volunteer work with?
Well, it depends on how many siblings are in a family. You could have 5 siblings in a family. Generally, we have one case, but that involves different numbers of children depending on the individual family.
David, help us with the process. How does this all take place? What is what are the steps for a CASA volunteer to become involved with a child, with a family?
Once you're trained in the CASA process, you're then eligible to be placed on a case. The logistics on the case go something like where there's a claim of abuse, either sexual, neglect, failure to thrive, any number of reasons for the Department of Human Services to come in and remove a child from a home. The judge would then make a decision to appoint a CASA volunteer to act as the eyes and ears of the court in providing various pieces of information regarding the actual claim, whether termination of parental rights would be in order. If so, how soon? Would foster care placement be in order? Is this child adoptable? Many issues are taken into account, but of course the first process is the Chapter 17 review.
Chapter 17 emergency hearing.
Which is the initial step where we first make our report to the court. And with the other professionals, such as the foster parents that are available, where there is a shortage in Austin, and there's been much attention recently in that, so people might give some attention to volunteering and opening their homes to being foster parents. We've had very little licensing of therapeutic foster homes in Texas, which is a differentiation between a regular foster home. There's a higher level of education, if I may say so, in a therapeutic home, and there's a need for a special child to be in that type of home. So we need that as well, but we bring in the social workers, the counselors, the school people, the children themselves, and then we advocate in their best interest. You know, when you go to court, there's going to be professionals advocating for the parents, an attorney for the mother, an attorney for the father. It was him, it was her, and maybe they blame it on the child. And there's very good representation with a guardian ad litem and an attorney ad litem program here in the county. But then the CASA comes in and adds a little something extra in that with the turnover of these other professionals, we're on a case until the child reaches the age of 18, or the case is finalized in some other form. That emancipation at 18, then the child becomes not a ward of the state, but they become an independent person, and we try to build their self-image in the meantime.
As a CASA volunteer, you are an advocate for the child. So
Yes.
therefore you're accountable to whom?
We're accountable to our board, specifically. Kathy is our case coordinator, as you mentioned, and my first role is to interview the principals and then review the case with Kathy. And Kathy and I discuss the services that would be available to the children depending upon their circumstances. That's very important because when we're involved in a case, we get a little bit of tunnel vision on the case and may not have the knowledge of the resources. So Kathy's very important in that regard, as our other case coordinators.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to that, David. Be thinking, as we go to Kathy, but be thinking about how do you keep your separation or your distance from that child and not becoming so caught up in the needs and the affection and the feelings that would develop with the child. Kathy, David mentioned that he'd come to you after visiting, listening, watching, observing, come to you. Then what is your responsibility? You're on the staff of CASA to coordinate those cases. Where do you go with that information? You visit with David, and then what happens next?
All right, David does most of the work on the case, and he will come to me and tell me what he has found, who he's talked to, different avenues, and we'll sit and discuss where we think the case needs to go. If we're still working toward reunifying the family, what else does the family need to patch things up for the child to come home? And we set up little steps then of things that he will try to facilitate.
So in other words, what you would do then, Kathy, is that you would even recommend that they go into counseling? What are the resources for counseling for the family?
And I help David with the community resources and what is out there and what is available.
think many times we become advocates for the entire family. You can't just advocate for the one child. There may be other children still that are remaining in the home, but to get that family back together, we may need to work with the family for drug counseling, help them find a job, help them find furniture, just to get moved into a house. So it's more than the child is your primary interest, but you've got to undergird the entire family to put all that
Karen,
together.
that's what I was thinking as David was speaking, that it seemed to me that the accountability for the advocate, which you all are, is first of all to that child, to that family. There are some technical accountabilities, such as to the board and to the staff and that type of thing, but first of all, it's to the family and to the child. David, what about that? How do you keep that separation? I know you as being a very loving, supportive papa, and you love your children and love your family. How do you keep space and not get too involved? How many do you have? Maybe you have one family, or do you have more than that you work with?
I have one family with 2 children, and CASA's caseload is dependent upon that individual CASA, the time that they can commit. We have a number of volunteers that are retired individuals that can commit more time and may have 2 or 3 cases in a year. I have one case because I do understand my limitations, and I have been on this case for 2 years. Feel very close with the children. I've been the only constant in their life. We've had turnover of social workers and other professionals, which is a natural thing.
Sure.
But to separate the emotion of being involved with them from your day-to-day life, you really don't, because you have to think about them and their resources and getting them in a timely fashion, because oftentimes you'll find that the cart may come before the horse, for example, where there's a problem that's beginning to occur. If we can stay in close contact with those children, we could foresee that, such as a situation I had where a young girl was debating whether she would deliver a child. She was 14 and she was pregnant, and we were looking ahead to how she would support that child, and she was taking a typing class, and she showed some interest in typing, and I suggested journalism as a career so that she could work at home, be with the child, and have as much quality time as possible. And a client of mine donated a typewriter at Christmas time, and that was really a neat thing to see. And the reciprocity of this process, in that we're giving and giving to the community and giving to these people, good things happen to you in your life. And if you're not seeking them out and you just let them happen, they do. And I'm thankful for that. There are a number of people
You
like
become a conduit for God's grace, is what we would say, and through that you receive. Karen, you've been in the longest, and you're in the program because you do get a return on your investment, correct?
Oh, you definitely do. What the child can bring to your life is far more important in many ways than what you can bring to their life. We have volunteers that, especially some of our retired volunteers, that have said their life was just sort of at a dull point, and these children have come into their lives, and they're thrilled to be able to have an opportunity to really make a difference in someone's life.
If people want to make that kind of difference, Karen, and they want to be able to get involved in CASA, then I imagine what they would do is contact the CASA office.
Right, we keep a list ongoing of people that are interested in becoming volunteers. We do an interview process. We'll have another volunteer class starting in February. And so, you know, it's not too soon now to start thinking about that February class. We also are always looking for people that could donate goods and services to the program. David's example is a perfect example of how CASA volunteers can use their own resources to find things. The state sometimes has limitations. You know, where do they go get a typewriter that doesn't cost anything? And the CASA volunteers can use their own church resources, their friends, job resources.
When we come to you, we call you at the office, all right? Or call the executive director or whomever, or the secretary answers, right?
Right.
What happens then? If we call them in the office, they say this is what's going to happen, and you have a telephone number and
We have a telephone number. Please call us anytime. We are always thrilled that
the
someone
office
will
is
call.
located where?
It's on West 10th, at New Aces and West 10th, right behind the courthouse. Call us, we'll talk to you, we'll send you an application, tell you a little bit of information about CASA, and tell you when the next training class is, and ask you to come in and talk with us about the program.
It sounds really exciting to me, and on just first blush, I'd say, wow, everybody who has any love for children, and certainly that's everybody, would want to run in and say, I want to be a CASA volunteer. But there's got to be some frustration. There's got to be some pain. There's got to be some struggle that goes along in this whole process. What about some of the frustration? Karen, what kind of frustration have you felt in the years since CASA started in terms of getting into this and then seeing the slow, ponderous way that the system works?
Well, I think we would like to have more volunteers out in the community. We're limited, the number of volunteers we have is limited by the number of staff we have to coordinate the cases. So you would always like to have more people available. And then on an individual case basis, you can become frustrated because you can see that there is so much more out there for a child, and sometimes what you would consider a nice, normal life for a child may not be what you can achieve for this CASA child. It may be far better than what they had, but it really makes your heart ache for some of these children to see that they've got a long struggle ahead of them.
David, how about you? What kind of frustration and feelings have you had during these 3 years now that you've been working with CASA?
Shortage of foster homes, shortage of therapeutic foster homes. Placing a child in a residential treatment center, there are a number of great ones available, but we find them to be the only alternative oftentimes, and it may not be the right thing for that particular child. They may need the one-on-one contact of a foster parent or therapeutic foster home, or actually our goal is for permanency in their life, because once they come out of an abused home, if they go from home to home in the foster care system, it's as counterproductive because there's no continuity, so that's frustrating. Oftentimes you get children that are categorized as unadoptable. The case I'm working on right now, which is frustrating, the counselor says he shouldn't be in a residential treatment center, another professional says something else. I then call for a permanency planning team meeting and say, let's all get together and talk this out, and are we sure we don't have some other resources available? And keeping in mind that caseworkers with DHS have 60 to 90 cases per year. So when a CASA comes in and has 1 case per year or 2, then we can give it some attention that it may not get elsewhere, although there are many excellent caseworkers as well.
Do you find that the caseworkers, the professionals, are willing to listen to you CASA volunteers and hear what you have to say?
We've earned their respect over time. When Judge Sokup in Seattle founded the program, in fact, his basis for it was leaving court and making decisions for people that when he left, he could leave it at 4 o'clock and say, I know I've made the best decision, they can live with that. Until he started working in family law and realizing that when he went home at 4, maybe that was not the best thing for a child. Because adults are expected to understand what the court says and to live by it and abide by it as mature individuals, but for a child to understand it, he needed to know he was doing the best thing, so he then came up with the CASA idea. And it's been well received, and we've gained the respect of professionals. And we've got some testimonies from other judges and professionals to back that up.
Karen mentioned at the top of the program that it started in Seattle and it's gone through, what, 49 states in the Union, and that it's been here in Texas now in, what, 22 communities, something like that is what you mentioned?
And we need so many more programs. There are, I think, 254 counties in Texas. Wherever family law is being heard, we need a CASA program.
It has to take money. Everything is M-O-N-E-Y, money, right? And
yes.
We on Austin Faith Dialogue don't ask people to send in money to the program, but it seems that maybe people might want to not only give their energy towards CASA, but they could also help in giving money to CASA. And what about, how do you fund this program, Kathy? Where do your financial resources come from for CASA?
We're a United Way agency. We get our funding there. We received several grants. The Junior League has been very generous in giving us several grants.
Were they involved at the very beginning of the Junior League?
They were. They helped.
Parent organization type?
Right, get the program started. We have a bike-a-thon we had for the last 2 years as a fundraiser. We have a membership drive. You're welcome to come join and be a member of our organization.
How much does it cost to become a member of the organization?
Anything.
Whatever you would like to donate. However generous you might want to be.
And I'm sorry.
Many people do call in, and they don't have the time or whatever to be a volunteer, but they would like to donate to the program, and we're very grateful.
The whole idea of Austin Faith Dialogue is to share with the viewing community and in our faith communities throughout Austin some of the great things that are happening in our community because of people like you. And I think that invitation is well made to invite people to become a part of CASA, not only through giving of their time, but also giving of their financial resources. You mentioned about United Way, you mentioned about the bike-a-thon. I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about that bike-a-thon. When is that held?
Well, it's held in April.
The bike-a-thon this year is April the 21st. We are already busy working on it. It's held out at Circle C Ranch, and we begin the bike-a-thon at Bowie High School. Both of those groups have been very supportive of the bike-a-thon. We hold it in conjunction with the Pebble Project, another agency in town that deals with child abuse. And it's a really wonderful event because it's a family event. We had children last year that came from group homes. These are abused children. They came out and rode their bikes to raise money for other abused children. And you can't get much neater than that, I don't think.
At the beginning of the program, I mentioned about a little boy who needed a constant presence in his life, and that a CASA friend provides that constant presence. That seems to me to be one of the great benefits of CASA, that you are there with the family and with the child, not to separate them, not to be divisive, but to rather help them in their struggles of life. Would you say that's the top priority then of a CASA volunteer, to be a presence in the life? David?
Oh, yes.
It is, definitely. I pay visits to the residential treatment center where the young boy is that I'm working with, and he's been in DHS system for about 5 years. The thing that, in talking with his counselors, that he can use is the encouragement of a third party, particularly male influence. Approximately 2/3 of the CASA volunteers are women, so I'd like to suggest that the men get involved as well. It's not a difficult time management thing, so we would hope to be able to work it into their schedules. But in talking with the counselors, yes, they need the encouragement, they need the leadership. It's called latency training when they go through it and start learning about what men do and what boys do in natural homes and in a routine home environment. And they don't often get that when they come from an abused home. Things that we think are routine may seem slightly unorthodox to them, but they need to know that it is quite natural and that there is camaraderie and there is support. And we offer that.
Dave, excuse me, but you say it's not a problem with time management. How much time, you're a businessman, how much time do you put into it?
On average, about 10 to 15 hours a month, and that varies. We meet with the court semi-annually, at which time we file an official report on the process and the prognosis for permanency in our position. And we meet quarterly for permanency planning team meetings with the other professionals. So if we're approaching a permanency planning team meeting, I'll spend a little bit more time. If we're approaching a court date, I'll spend more time. But the staff is very helpful as well in that we're doing the legwork out there, and we're not left to the administrative tasks of typing the reports and doing those things. So Kathy and Betty at the office and the ladies that do that work, it's very supportive staff. So I say that time management is a key, however, it's not obtrusive in getting it done.
It's really exciting to think that a person of faith like yourself gets involved in this type of program. Where is it going to go now? Where's CASA going to go? You've been at it for 5 years in Austin. What's the future for CASA? Kathy?
Well, we would hope that everyone would want to be a CASA and that we could have a CASA for every child that's in the court system. And I guess that's our goal for Travis County. We have some wonderful volunteers and some very committed volunteers, and we always need more volunteers.
You've been working with families and with children. Are you going to go into any other age groups?
We're going to start working with juveniles. We have, and we're going to try to expand our program into the juvenile courts. These are children that are more or less what we call status offenders. They've committed offense that, as an adult, it would not be a crime. They've run away. They have been truant from school, things like this. And we are hoping to match volunteers with these children. They're very much in need of an advocate and someone to share time with.
As case coordinator, you find that exciting to be going into that area?
Yes, I do. I'm very excited about it.
We're about ready to wrap it up, and I'd just like to ask you, if you had to do it over again, looking in retrospect, would you do it, and what has been the benefit? And Karen, let's ask you, what's been the benefit for you in these 5 years with CASA?
Well, I have been involved in numerous volunteer organizations in town, and I think if someone came to me tomorrow and said, you really need to give up all of your which might be my husband, you need to give up all your volunteer activities but one, I would choose CASA. That is the volunteer organization that I get the most from. And I don't know if you've shown our logo on the screen, but there's a little heart in the logo. You develop a heart for what is happening with these children.
David, how about you?
Yes, certainly. I got involved because I've had an interest in working with children for a long time. And when I heard of the abuse and neglect that was going on, and I've seen it, I'm in people's homes all the time, and I see various forms of abuse. And it's oftentimes difficult to convey resources available to them. And now, with the training I've had and the 2 years of experience, I can tactfully mention something such as Lutheran Social Services or some other excellent resource for getting counseling or assistance to a family.
I want to thank the three of you, Kathy, David, and Karen.
Thank you.
And I'd like you in the TV audience to listen to these words as we close our Austin Faith Dialogue for today. As dawn broke over the beach, the old man asked the youth why he was flinging starfish into the sea. The answer was that they'd die if they were left in the sun. But the beach goes for miles and miles, and there are millions of them, he countered. What difference is it going to make? And the young man looked at the starfish and said, as he threw it to safety, it makes a difference to this one. You met three people who make a difference in the community. We invite you to make that same type of difference. Thanks for watching Austin Faith Dialogue.